What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Game Dev Unchained, hosted by Blue Champs, the #1 game development podcast about game development and the lifestyle thereof. I am your host, Brandon Pham, and I want to welcome our special guest this episode from the Substance team. I'm going to go with your first name, Jeremie and François. How are you guys doing? Going to unmute you real quick.
Here.
All right. So this is the part I think it's best to kind of let you guys introduce yourself. Let's start with you, Jeremie, where you introduce yourself to our audience and listeners out there, who you are, where you're from, where you're heading. And right after that, of course, Francois, you can come in as well.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. So I'm Jeremie. I'm currently principal product manager at Adobe on the 3D side of things. And before Adobe, I was working at Algorithmic, the Substance team, for about 13 years. That was my first job coming out of college. I come from France, like most of the Substance team, and I'm now in San Francisco in the Adobe office.
All right. Your turn, Francois.
Yeah, sure. So François, I'm also from France. I'm the marketing director for everything 3D at Adobe. I've been with Substance for years. I started when we were only developing Substance Designer for the game community. And we went a long way, and now we have a suite of products that you all know, and we're serving not only the game development community, but also.
All right. So we're getting a slight lag, but let me kind of switch over to this right now. And this is kind of like the last few months, right? Of course, the pandemic is no mystery. Hopefully it's no surprise to everybody. But what I like to kind of start it off with is kind of getting like a survey of the industry of how everyone is coping, either small or AAA or tool developers like you guys. How has this shifted your marketing plan, your development plans, if any, in the past couple 3 months, I guess?
So, I can talk about that. It's been a change for sure, but I think the world never played that many video games as today. So all our customers are all these game studios are. It's a bit complex to organize now that everybody is working from home. But the number of players grew, and also extensions like VR headsets have never sold that well. And so people have time for video games. People have time to try new things also. Very good times for the video game industry, I would say. Even if it's complex to organize, it's good moment for the industry.
What's your view on it, Jeremie? How are things over there on the development side?
I mean, I think for us it's been an adjustment as well, and I think we're I think the way we work is somewhat similar to a game studio. We're still, even though we're in a big company, we're a small part of the big company, and we have small teams and all working from home. So it's been a challenge, but after the first couple of weeks, everything feels like the new normal, and things are going on smoothly. But yeah, it's definitely a change.
That's fantastic. So I've been a fan of you guys for a long time, ever since day one. It feels like ever since your announcement of Substance Tools, it kind of took the industry by storm. And I don't know if this is true. The game industry was your first industry that Substance was revealed, and now it's broadening, as we were talking about before the interview. But you were talking about us being a smart team and being a part of a bigger team now, and the acquisition was one of the biggest news last year for sure. How has this kind of, I don't know how much you can talk about, how has it freed you guys to develop on ideas that before was kind of more on the back burner of things, and now you guys have free reign of really developing these ideas to the next level?
I can take this one. It's been interesting. Of course, there's been a little bit of adjustment period to integrate such a larger team. But now that we're kind of settled in, we have so many resources that we could only dream of before. Typically, Adobe has, not a lot of people know this, but Adobe has a gigantic research department with hundreds of researchers, and these people have been working on research in the 3D field for years, but they've already had a receptacle, a product to actually put these to use. And now we're here and they're all coming to us like, can we put that in your tool? Can we put that in your tool? And it's super exciting for us. It's kind of overwhelming, but there is just so many opportunities. It's a really fun time to be at the Substance team.
And of course, Francois, you've been part of the team for a long time. Now you're part of a bigger unit. It's probably more helpful to have more marketing guys around the office for sure. Any changes in that front that you've been kind of gaining? Just overall development?
Yeah. Sure. Two things there, I would say. First is that we brought back gaming to Adobe. Adobe was not extremely focusing on gaming before the acquisition of Algorithmic, and this was part of the acquisition of Substance, was to bring gaming back into Adobe. And Adobe today is making efforts to better support the gaming community as a whole with 3D tools, obviously, but not only. And this is the second topic, is that by connecting to Adobe, we have more means, but we also have more colleagues, and we can connect better the 3D tools to all the 2D tools that Adobe is publishing also. And this is opening new opportunities for better productivity, more creativity, smoother pipelines between the 2D tools and the 3D tools. So we're working on that also because it brings value to everyone in the end. And I would say we're bringing game to Adobe. We brought game to Adobe, but also Adobe broadened the scope of the impact of 3D. And as many of you may know, but the 3D field is led by the game industry, more or less. So you have game developers that are hired by automotive companies, for instance, or even furniture companies, because these know-how of how to build nice 3D experiences is something that is useful for way more than only gaming, for the film industry, architecture, and those different examples. And so we're also better connected now with Adobe to serve this market. So for us, it's an extension of the gaming market, and for Adobe, the acquisition of Algorithmic is an extension into gaming.
I definitely agree with that. Being a game developer myself, I've been seeing the trends moving towards using real time for changing workflows in all industries. And it's great to kind of hear that Adobe is bringing back the gaming community within its tool set. It's an important community, as always. I mean, everybody, it started in the industry with Photoshop. And it's great to kind of hear you guys having more resources to kind of grow your tool set and everything. And a little bit about this topic, actually, I would love to kind of hear you guys more insight about this. You know, the game industry, or game tools specifically, are being used in all these other industries like architectural or animation, movies. We were seeing The Mandalorian using digital sets of Unreal to kind of help not bore the actors, right, in front of a green screen. So we're seeing like these revolutionary ways to work now, and being integrated so importantly in these industries. Are you seeing like this influx of other developers that have been coming into Substance tools that are using, not used to it, or now like loving it and discovering it, along with all these other tools that we game developers have been using for years now? Oh,
François, we can't hear you.
Oh, yeah, we got cut off. So I'll go ahead.
Sorry.
There we go.
No, I'm here. I was just muted. Do you want to go to give some examples to dive into that, Jeremie, or?
Sure. There's ton of examples. I don't know if I can talk about any of it because a lot of things is confidential. But there are tons of, we see tons of like Francois said, industries that come to video game because that's where, if you want the best visual quality, with the best feedback iterative loop, you need to go with real-time solutions, and all those real-time solutions come from the gaming industry. So we see tons of other industries picking up Unreal, Unity, game engines and game tools to build, for example, VR experience, but not only. Also, they use it, as you said, for VFX, even in the design process of consumer goods. Like a lot of luxury brands, for example, use or car brands will use real time in the design phase while they build a car, they conceive, they design a purse, and so. The game technology allow them to reduce those iterative loop extremely to an extremely fast turnaround. And obviously it looks better, but also just save them money just because of the fact that instead of designing a purse, instead of actually having to source the leather and build that purse in real life to see what it looks like, you can just design it in Unreal or any other package and see it pretty much as close as possible to reality. So you pretty much every kind of industry in the world is looking at real time to basically save money. Oh, I can't hear you anymore. Sorry.
Sorry. I muted myself. Poor François. It definitely helps, with eliminating, well, not eliminating completely, but at least limiting the post-production process in what these industries or other industries are pretty much used to, and they're kind of changing the workflow and stuff. In my experience too, I want to kind of throw this back at you, Jeremie. Like, our game development tools have been evolving for the last 20, 30 years, going through, I always track it to the Sony console generation. It's just easier to track it. PS2 to PS3 with normal mapping, and then moving on to lighting and rendering and ray tracing now. Game developers have been kind of there every step of the way. But like now these industries are kind of they're kind of have to fast learn all these tricks, basically. How have you been wrapping their head around this concept of just game development? I mean, how challenging has that been?
It depends on the industry, I guess, and each industry is different, and each player in the industry is different. We'll see some companies picking up those new technologies super fast and creating stuff that is really crazy quality in a short amount of time. And you'll have industries where we've been trying for years to bring to kind of evangelize real-time 3D and game tools, and it's still hard. It really depends. I think it depends on how critical that transition to digital is for each industry, and how far they were in the first place. We see some, like in the design industry, there are people that are just really very proficient with 3D already, and that are picking up these tools just because, again, it's a pipeline issue and a cost issue that they need to address now. Other industries, like, for example, architecture, are a little slower because they've been doing 3D for a long time, but kind of an old school 3D. And for most of the time, it still works fine for them because it's static, and then they may not need, or they may not feel the need to have real-time 3D in this industry. So it just depends. They're all kind of more or less slow to adopt or fast to adopt. But I think in the end, every industry and every single company in the world will likely use 3D, real-time 3D, that is.
Definitely. I kind of want to throw this back over to Francois. I think you're about to start, but I want to hear your thoughts about this.
Yeah, sure. My take is that They have been 3D in other industries for a while, but mostly for manufacturing processes. And of course, automotive or architecture have been using 3D for dozens of years. But it was for a completely different purpose. And today they are discovering that visualization in 3D is something that is using different methods. And if you really want to achieve high quality and interactivity and be able to reuse easily your assets for a lot of different purposes, you have to do that using the techniques coming from the game. And also what it brings, the real-time thing that is happening these days, as you were saying, with the new console generations and all that, is that in the past, interactivity was at the cost of visual quality, but it's not really the case anymore. For a lot of use cases, you cannot, unless you're a specialist, you cannot really make the difference between an offline rendering and real-time rendering, depending on the use cases, of course. But for a lot of use cases, the difference is not that big anymore. The gap is not that big anymore. So it means that previously, as a creative professional, you had to work in a kind of abstraction, and you were working all day long on something that was an abstraction of the final product, the final media, the final sequence. Or it's not the case anymore. Now, with real time, you can iterate directly on the final product, and it is changing everything. And this is also why Adobe is embracing 3D today, because if you look at the other tools at Adobe, they are all real-time tools, I would say. When you're working on Photoshop, you're not working on an abstraction of the final image, you're working on the final image. And if you change a pixel, you change a pixel in the final image. In 3D, until recently, you were working on something that was an abstraction, lower quality, simplified geometry, simplified lightings, simplified materials, and then you had to render. And this abstract phase, they meant that people who were not specialists were unable to predict what the final result would look like. It's still completely the case for very advanced 3D like VFX, and you were talking about Mandalorian, or of course, when you're at this level of extreme quality, you still have a difference between the final product and the different steps before. But for more everyday purposes 3D, I would say, now you can go real time and you can iterate in real time. And we see this happening in many industries, in the game industry, obviously, but also in the other industries. And it's changing everything.
Well, speaking of changing everything, I kind of want to dive a little deeper on that. Of course, increasing workflows, increasing speed can mean two things, right? It means that we can get quality faster, but it can also mean that producer want more things at once, right? And so I kind of want to talk about that. Like, what type of workflow changes that this is creating for all industries right now? Do you think the quality of product, of course, with large teams, are going to get better, but that being even truer with the smaller teams, even because now tools are so accessible, and you're using essentially the same tools at bigger studios to produce the same level of art. It just depends on your time. I want to hear you guys' thoughts of how the last 2 years, especially, just influx of great tools like Substance and other tools. How has the changes been from your perspective?
So I would start rapidly with saying that I At Substance, we don't differentiate our tools depending on the level of proficiency or on the cost of the tool. It's very important. It's a very important choice we made, and students today get Substance for free, and it's exactly the same product as what AAA studio would use. So there is absolutely no differentiation in the product. So the accessibility of the tools is key to spread them, but also to make sure that the industry has enough people to hire, and that the know-how can fluidly go from the bigger studios to smaller studios, from students to studios, etc., etc. I think this is an important choice we made on the Substance side, and this is something that is part of our success probably today. And the result is that small studios have exactly the same tools as big studios. So creativity wins in the end.
Yeah, that's pretty good news for everyone for sure. So I want to ask you, Jeremie, like with all these tools being better, and we're talking about, the oncoming new consoles that are basically going to up our quality and output at the end of the year, right? So my question is that with all these tools coming out, and especially every console generation, let me kind of go back a bit. Every console generation is defined by the lighting and rendering pipeline and texturing, right? From the normal map to ray tracing now. So what is the next leap that we're going to be seeing with the next console generation? Is it going to be more quality stuff, or are there different techniques that you feel? And I see Substance being at the forefront of defining what our quality and next leap is. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there are some just obvious things, like we'll have higher resolution textures, obviously, and higher poly counts and more complex meshes. But I think we'll probably truly differentiate this new generation. And I think we saw it with the very few images that we've seen of next gen stuff is first the shading. I think the last generation we had the Pbr Shader, the advent of Pbr shading, and that kind of caused a big leap in the realism of materials in general in games. But it's in most games today in the current generation, it's still fairly limited. You basically have a color, a roughness, a metallic, and a normal map, and that's pretty much all you have in your shader, unless there's some specific cases. I think the next generation we're going to see materials get much more complex with much more complex material reaction, like sheen and clear coat and thin film. There's all sorts of physical properties to materials in real life that the simplified PBR model we use in the current generation does not account for. And I think this will really bridge the gap between the rendering you see today and what could be seen as like a real life object or photo. That's one thing, and especially applied to characters and that kind of object. I think we're going to start to see characters that have a quality at least in cinematics, maybe not in gameplay, but in real-time cinematics, they will have the same quality as what you would find in VFX today. The second part is also I think linked to characters is I think we're at a point where we finally have the power and the knowledge and the algorithm to do proper hair, fur, and clothes simulation in a very realistic way, which was kind of we had some of that this generation, but it was very kind of approximations and tricks and kind of cheating. I think we're going to we already see that with there's some papers from in Unreal and in Frostbite. There is already some interesting work on that. I think we'll see in the next generation, characters that are really lifelike. I think that will be the big leap.
Welcome, hooray from character teams all around the world. We've had character artists from the Sony Monica team, and the one frustrating thing that always comes up is the hair and cloth. Well, hair especially, because they're still using alpha cards, and that's a PS2 technique, and that has not changed for 2 generations. So it's definitely one of those things. Yeah, I feel environment have been benefiting from these console generation. And characters, at least in tool set, that they've gotten more to play with for sure, but they've always been stuck in that just carding hair is like making grass on people. It's frustrating for sure.
Yes.
What are the biggest features that you guys are working on? I know Substance 2020 has been making a lot of waves the last few months. Any of that you guys want to talk about?
I can talk a little bit about what just came out and what's coming up. So we have a new version of Substance Painter coming out tomorrow, actually, and that will bring some really cool features that are not necessarily new, shiny, kind of exciting features, but are more features to, again, just improve your workflow and make your work a little more enjoyable every day. And so that goes through, we revamped the export process. A lot of people are complaining about the exporting in Substance Painter. You now have much more control, much more feedback about how you export textures, and what texture you export, what format, what resolution, and those kind of things. We also, since last year, we introduced automatic UVs in Substance Painter, and that was a huge milestone for us, because that's always been kind of one of our holy grail is to get rid of the UV process, because it's really just, I don't know a lot of people who like making UVs, let's say it that way. And so we introduced that automatic UV system. But once you add your automatic UVs, exporting that mesh back from Substance Painter was a little bit painful, and we didn't have like really good options for this. So we improved that as well. And now you can bring in a mesh, create your automatic UVs, and you can export it back as an FBX. We'll keep your triangulation, your quads, your endguns, if you have any. We'll keep the structure of the scene, the bones in there and everything. So everything is kept so that mesh can just flow through the pipeline through Substance Painter. And we added a few more options to the automatic UV. So the goal is really to make it production proof. Right now, we think it works good. It can work great. So we're still working on it. But this is getting some nice improvements. And I think the other thing we were excited about was the bakers. Because as you know, in Substance Painter and pretty much any workflow today, baking maps for your assets is a crucial part of the workflow, because a lot of automation that can go on during the workflow, and a lot of effects you'll build are based on curvature and ambient occlusion and the way you can create edge wear automatically and all that kind of stuff. And people rely on that very heavily. And so getting the quality of the bakes as good as possible is always one of our big goals. And so with this new version, we have a new curvature baker that is miles better than the previous one, and faster as well. So we're super excited about this. It should help a lot with the creation of smart materials and wear and tear and stuff like that. And I think the other thing that I'm personally very excited about, because I played a lot with it and I can't wait for people to get their hands on it, is I think we presented a couple of weeks ago during our keynote, is a AI image to material in Substance Alchemist. And so a lot of people have been using Bitmapped Material for a long time. This came out, I think, like 7 or 8 years ago now. But Bitmapped Material was just our simple tool. There was Crazy Bun before that, made by another guy. A tool you just import a photo and generates a normal map and roughness and whatnot from your photo. And it works okay for how simple it is to use. But there's a lot of cases that are tricky and it doesn't work, because in the end it's very simple math applied on an image. And so this new AI-based system, instead of being simple math based on the pixels of the image you fit to it, it uses AI to look at this image and try to figure out what is actually pictured in that image. And from that, it will figure out where the shadows are, where the highlights is, and remove the shadows and make sure that a bump should be a bump and a hole should be a hole, based on actual learning. So what we did is that algorithm, we trained it by feeding it tons and tons of photogrammetry data so that it can recognize if you take a picture of a rock, it recognizes it's a rock and that it should be kind of a bump. Or if you take a picture of, I don't know, like a road with cracks, it will recognize that these are cracks and these should be holes. And so that works so much better than Bitmapped Material, and so much better than any other similar application out there. That really feels like magic, and that should come out in the next month or two, and we really can't wait for people to play with it. It's really fun.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot of software companies like yourselves, at least on the Trello board, one of the biggest thing is to make automation as fun as possible and at the utmost quality, and which also frees up a lot of the artist's time to kind of dive into creativity part of it, right? You were
I think the goal is to I think the goal is to, rather than like, the automation doesn't replace the artist, it just helps him get better at what he does, and just helps him kind of not spend too much time on stuff that is not that important in the end.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, UVs, I'm the same boat as you. I don't know how many people actually enjoy the UVing process. I met a few, but I feel a lot of them are gone through so much of a torture, and like an abusive victim. They just don't know any other way. They just find it meditative. I mean, that's the reason they say it's like, guys, this process is going to be gone someday. They just haven't figured it out. So I'm glad to kind of hear that Substance Suite is kind of tackling that problem, because I'd rather be doing something else than UVing for sure. But to talk more about the automation part of it, right? It seems like more and more tools are moving towards this to kind of free up the developer or artist's time. What kind of benefits, besides the obvious, right? Do you feel like this is going to be at the end product going to give everybody to basically to the user at the end, the clients?
I think both quality and quantity, really, or either or both. It really depends on the goal of the developer and the type of game you're building. But in the end, whatever time you save, you can spend creating more content or creating better content. And I think it shows already when you compare the games that are built this generation compared to the games that were built the generation before. The amount of content you have in a game is just phenomenal, and the teams are not that bigger. Like the studios, even the big studios, they don't expand their team indefinitely. They cannot. It's just not enough artists out there, and you can't stretch that budget so much. So the same amount of artists, they're creating worlds and games that are so much bigger and so much higher quality. And I think we'll keep seeing that trends in the next generation. I don't know how big next GTA is going to be, but it's probably going to be like a full continent or something.
Definitely. Oh, one of the and I guess this can go to both of you guys, one of each. I think in the past year or something, VR has kind of been on the rise, right? I think before it was more like people were super excited, but then realistically, people kind of saw like a slow adoption. But I think in the past year, especially, we're hearing more and more developers just profiting from their games finally, right? They're not relying on publishers for the income. They're actually getting money back from their work, right? Which is like a regular game developer. They're actually a business now. One of the big acquisition after you guys were, the Medium tool. I don't know how much you guys can talk about that, but at that point, VR has always been my favorite frontier for developers. I'm using the VR mode in Unreal right now, and not particularly for any reasons, but just to look at my assets inside the world in VR and just notice things that I didn't notice before. I don't know how much you guys can talk about, at least on that side. Where's your stance on VR, using it within Substance, at least Painter, and all that?
So there are two different phases where immersivity makes a whole difference. There is consumption and there is authoring. The consumption part has been a roller coaster, like all the new, all the innovations, I would say. So the first generation, the headsets were not completely ready. The visual quality was low. It was very complex to set up. You had some motion sickness. And so we worked with the first generations of Oculus and Vive headsets, and it was a nightmare, really. There were so many constraints that it was the beginning of an innovation, so it was deceptive. And then, like all the innovations, after a while, the headsets get better. The visual quality is now really great. Interaction is super fluid. The setup is super simple. The price of the headsets have been falling down, etc., etc. So now I would say it's mature for games. In terms of experience, it's great for the consumption phase. And the best proof is that these days, all headsets are out of stock. So I think there cannot be any better proof that this is really enjoyable today. And since consumption is great, is a good experience, studios go more and more in this direction, and the quality of the games also tend to improve a lot. And this is becoming just another way of consuming games. And it's great, and it's growing, and it will continue to grow. There is no reason why. It's more intense as an experience because you can spend as much time in immersivity as you would spend just in front of your TV or computer. But this is something that it's a great experience. And then the second part is that immersivity in the authoring phase is also very interesting, especially for the authors, for the artists. As you were saying, the first time you encounter your creator in real life, not in real life, but in immersivity, it's a shock. When I don't know, if you're painting a character or a monster, a dragon, an asset, whatever it is, and you can walk around it and you can see the reflection of the light just by moving your head, or you can just feel the size of the character by walking around it. It's a completely different experience for authoring game assets, for sure, but also for authoring assets that will be in real life. As you can imagine, this is completely changing everything for architects to be able to dive into the final building, or for product designers, for car designers, for all these people. They have the same need, which is encounter an object that is more or less looking like what they are working on. And so back to the game industry, we think that immersivity will be more and more used during the authoring phase. As you probably saw, we already showed a prototype of Substance Painter in VR. It's a great experience. Now it's not a product. This is something that is only in prototype phase internally. But being able to work on the surface of your object, because now it's not only textures, but it's textures and a little bit of sculpting that you can do in Substance Painter. Being able to do that in immersivity, it's more intense, but there's a relation between you and your creation that is completely unique. And this is also what we loved with Medium, is that it's so natural to sculpt in Medium. It can be impressive to see these people wearing headsets, and because it's immersive, it's intense. But once you try, it's so natural that if you're a good sculptor in real life, you can immediately create nice stuff using Medium. And this is really an astonishing experience for those who never tried it.
I would say even if you're not a good sculptor, you can actually create nice stuff in Medium, because I'm a terrible artist, and I can create some pretty decent stuff in there. So it's really fun to play with.
Yeah, so I come from the environment background, right? And it's only until recently, I've always been, since day one, I think most gamers love VR, right? They get it. It's just the potential is there and everything. It's just not there yet until recently, right? With products being better, you don't have to have 10 cameras set up in your room. Your wife is not yelling at you for taking up so much room. So it's just a headset now with the new Oculus. So it's great. So it's heading to the right direction. But it definitely, as an artist, now that I'm using VR to kind of look at my product or have that relation that we were talking about, I'm not just creating a prop and just, for games, it's just like prop in the corner, just, walk by. But now I'm looking at it as if I'm like an industrial designer, like how does this actually function? Because I'm like right next to it and I'm reaching my hand. I was like, how would I actually turn this thing? And it's just unlocking a part of the creativity, I think another layer as an artist to kind of interface and think of it as a real product like these other industries are using it for. So I kind of want to throw this back to you, Jeremie. Like, what part of that are you pretty excited about to kind of see? I know you guys are still in testing phase and everything, but I want to hear your thoughts from the developer side of what potential this can unlock for you guys.
Definitely, there's, as François said, there's a lot of potential, and Painter and Medium, I think, are just touching on that potential, but there's so much more we can do with it. And again, I can't talk specifics, and we'll have to wait a little longer to talk more in detail about what we're doing. But yeah, I think just the presence of being next to your asset can help not only with painting and sculpting, but pretty much any kind of medium, any part of the pipeline. Really, the same, like you're visualizing your assets in Unreal in the end, just to have a sense of the scale and the way to look in the world. I think every step of that pipeline could be translated to VR, and that's something that we can finally do, because again, as François said, the hardware is good enough now that we can. Like a couple of years ago, you would put on a headset, and after 20 minutes, your eyes would start tearing up, and it was really hard to actually work in VR. But with the latest headsets, I can spend like a couple of hours in Medium playing with a sculpt, and not really see the time go by, and I don't feel tired afterwards. So once you're in it, it's really you're gonna get lost in your art. So I guess that's one of the risks associated to it, is that you may end up spending more time on your assets because you don't realize that you're in a different world when you're working on it, and you kind of the outside world is kind of you forget about it. But it's a fun place to be in when you're in that kind of artistic mode and just think about your asset and nothing else.
So going back to like how these different industries are kind of being introduced to our world, right? What unique cases have you guys seen that was very surprising? I mean, only some are familiar with architectural product design. The same way they're being introduced to us, we're slowly being introduced to their field of how they're using 3D, particularly, right? The specifics. Any of those case studies that you guys can share where it was like, oh, I never really thought of it this way, that helped with your product development, marketing, into substance tools and stuff like that?
What can we share, François? Do you know if you have any use case?
We can share. The furniture industry, for instance, has moved considerably to virtual photography and to replacing the photo shoots by synthetic imagery. So IKEA has been leading there, and the catalog you have is mostly CG today. It's very advanced CG, but it's using the same techniques as the techniques from the game industry, and it's astonishing to see the flexibility and the productivity it brought. Because as you can imagine, shooting scenes of interior and furniture is super complex, super expensive. You have to transport all the furniture, you have to build custom interiors and to decorate everything. And it takes a lot of time, and you shoot one picture and then you destroy everything. And if you want to make a single change because you want to sell the same piece of furniture, but to a different country where you don't have, you need a different style, different environment, or you just want to ship it in a different color the next year, you have to redo everything. So this whole industry embraced 3D at different levels of quality. Obviously, you can see on some e-commerce websites very simple 3D, I would say. But you can see also big companies that have completely revisited the way they are producing all their imagery, and they replaced completely photo shoots by synthetic photography, by virtual photography. And what we brought on the substance side is the know-how around materials, because in the end, whatever the rendering engine you will use, the main difference in the quality of the final image will be thanks to the materials you will use. If it's too perfect, it will not look realistic. And we all know that this is something that is super well mastered by developers, by artists, and this is spreading like wildfire in those industries. So everything around e-commerce, I would say, not only furniture, but e-commerce is embracing 3D, real-time 3D, but also just 3D imagery, like super fast.
Fantastic.
And also the other way around. We worked a lot with architects the previous years. We are working with all the major architecture studios. You can go on our website and you'll see all the big logos and famous logos. But we learned a lot working with these people because they know exactly how the materials look like in real life. And they could teach us to differentiate the different types of concretes and to differentiate the different methods of construction and how things are really made, and why this brick is looking differently in Japan than it's looking in Western Europe, because it's not the same the same components in the earth, and in the end it has to look different. And if you go into every single details like that with those who really know, because they've been doing that for dozens of years, they have material specialists internally, they have material libraries, huge material libraries, and this know-how around real life materials is something that we're bringing back to the game industry. So if you go to Substance Wars, for instance, and you look for architecture materials, these are materials that we made with the best architecture firms and the best architecture experts. And it brings a level of realism that comes with this expertise. It doesn't mean that everything has to look realistic. We just dropped a stylized set of materials on Substance Source, and it's super popular and it's working well, and game people were super excited about it. But in some cases, you need also to stick to reality, or at least to understand how reality is, to take an artistic distance to this reality. So we're also doing it the other way around and bringing in some expertise from architecture back into gaming.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, one of the most exciting thing about the time that we're in right now, the collaboration of different industries. And I love the fact that developers, maybe in the near future, I know they're already starting, that artists from different industries can jump between different industries, which gives a huge plus in the amount of jobs that you can apply for with the same skill set. So I love this merging of all the industries using the same tool sets and same workflows. And I kind of want to ask Jeremie about this for the developer side. PBR is something the visual effects taught us, and we're still perfecting it. You're talking about these architectural firms that have been using real life materials and are teaching us, how exactly, how it should react, how it's made up, and how it is different from one country to the next, right? Which is super important because we are getting into the nitty gritty of things to make things really good. I feel like the game industry before was kind of like in its infancy, right? Just make it look good. That's kind of like the art director, just make it look good. But now we're actually having the time and creativity to kind of put back into development. And so more asking to Jeremie now, like what type of workflows are you seeing that now that not only am I an environment artist and I can build this building, but I can build it as if I am an architect, right? What workflows do you see some of that coming back that you feel like you guys for the next 2 years you need to kind of listen up if you want to stay on top of your game, because this is happening right now? Oh, let me switch back to Jeremie.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself. I think it circles back to what I was saying about the next generation of consoles and the fact that materials are going to be much more complex. There's a lot of material properties that I guess game developer didn't really care about until now, just because it was maybe too costly and too costly in terms of performance, in terms of time spent setting this up. That we will see appearing just again to get closer and closer to reality, and some of the stuff that is being used a lot, for example, in product design, which is very accurate, transparent, translucency, and sort of scattering and refraction and clear coat, for example, which is like the layer you had, the clear layer, glossy layer you have on top of the surface, for example, carbon fiber or things like this that we see a little bit like in racing games today, but very little. There's actually a lot of material in real life that uses these kind of properties, and we'll be able now with the power we have and the performance we have to actually apply those to many more materials. And again, if you're going for a realistic look, I guess materials are going to just get more complex. And our goal is to make that transition not as painful as it could be, and to anticipate that those materials are going to get more complex, and there's new channels that are going to come up, and there's ways to visualize it and to create them easily. And that's what we're currently working on in our tools, and we'll be we'll make sure to follow very quickly the evolution of the industry to make sure that when those needs to create those much more complex materials come up, that on the Substance side, the Adobe side, we're ready to give you tools that allow you to express those materials without pulling your hair out.
Well, let's just make it easier for the lazy creatives out there for sure. I'm all for that. This is a fantastic time, actually. We hit the hour mark. I want to thank you guys for surviving an hour of the podcast, and thank you for you guys' time. And as always, wish you guys and your families and everyone super safe during these crazy times. This is also the time for me to kind of shut up and hand over the mic to you guys to promote, give attention to let the good people out there know how to level up their game out there with Substance. So I'm going to switch over to your dual cam so you can both go ahead and whoever wants to take it first.
Yeah, Jeremie, you can do that.
All right.
Let's repeat what is coming in the tools and content.
I think with the way where we are at right now with Substance, I think, and I'm not part of the marketing team, so I can say that too. But I think we're in a really good place for artists. If you have the Substance suite, you pretty much have everything you need. And with Substance Painter and the new features for generating the UVs automatically and all the smart materials and everything that are available. Even I would say a single person creating game on the side, even if he's not an artist, it's very easy to create good looking assets by just dropping a mesh, applying smart materials. Baking is pretty much automatic, and you can get some really good looking assets this way. For environments, with Alchemist, you can drag and drop a photo or any existing material that you may have that you got on Substance Source, and start layering them to create something unique, and you can get some really good results as well. So I think we're at a point where I wouldn't say it's easy to make games, because it is not, but making art for game is easier than ever, and I'm very excited about this because we see so many games coming out that are using Substance, and we're always so excited every time. Even though there's been a lot of games using Substance, we're always super excited to see every new game coming up, even if it's a AAA or a small indie game, coming up with new ways to use the tools and to create some new art style that we've never seen before. There's always something exciting. That's what's cool with the game industry, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't say more. For sure, the AAA games, very advanced games, are leading the pack in terms of quality and quantity most of the time. But the long tail of smaller games that are very creative bring a lot, and our tools are there to help all these creators. Big companies, big studios, but also small, super creative indie teams. And yeah, Substance is here for everyone.
Well, I want to thank you from behalf of the game developers out there for making great tools and making this transition a lot more fun. I mean, more than ever, people are at home dreaming about being outside. So this year, if anything, should be fruitful for everybody on the tools and games side, like we mentioned before. I want to thank you guys for coming on. And thank you so much, man. I learned so much. I'm super excited.
Thank you for having us.
And it's always fun to have tool developers on. So that's it. See you guys next week.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Bye.